for Region 2, and he is going to talk about construction and how he can support you in delivery of your projects and how you can help him, as we know that as we deliver these PSNE packages, construction has to deal with them. So welcome, Vidal.
All right. Can everybody hear me? I don't get a clap. Thank you for having me, David. I appreciate it. I like the idea of actually coming here and talking to you all about what I do. I do have a lot of slides to show you. Actually, there's about 15 of them. And these slides, actually, there's a lot of information on them. And more than likely, I probably won't touch everything on there, but because I know that you guys have this as printouts as part of your work booklet that's been handed out to you. Am I too loud? Okay. So like I said, there is, oh, thank you. There's a lot of information on here, but again, I probably won't go through all of it, but I think what's more important is that I try to at least deliver to you what you probably need. If there's any questions during the time of the presentation, and we're going to be monitoring time, I'll try to answer those really quick, but nevertheless, I'll try to cater this presentation such that how many TPMs? TPMs, is that the term now? TMPs? How many TPMs we have in the room here? Okay, REs. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a feel for the room here. Okay, so my name is Vidal Francis. I've been in construction for the last 6-7 years. Prior to that, I worked in bridge. Prior to that, I worked in pavements. Prior to that, I was in construction. I actually like what I do right now. I manage the Salem construction office. We've got a lot of projects going on, a lot of work that's really good for us, keeping the whole crew busy. And like I said, I have a lot of stuff here, and I'm going to try to go through what I think is important for you to know as far as what we do. The battery?
Maybe a battery, so just use this key.
This key, okay, all right, we'll use the key. So a construction office is generally make up of about maybe 10 to about 18 individuals. And I put this on here, all the definitions are on there. Generally, what's in blue is primarily the main core of the construction office. Myself as the resident engineer, I have 2 assistants that work underneath me, and beneath them we have 2 coordinators, and in the light blue we also have some regular inspectors, and also we use consultant services to actually do inspection work for us. During the PDT, more than likely you'll see me presenting, representing my team, but more than likely I'll also send my assistant resident engineers to, I may get the term confused a little bit because I'm still transitioning from RE, APM, PM, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so I may say APM or PM, so it's the same thing. And then later towards the project development, as we go through the whole PDT process, I'll start bringing in my project coordinators to come and review some of the plans, et cetera. So more than likely towards the beginning of the PDT phase, as we start going through kickoff and so forth, myself and my assistants will show up. And then as we get towards final plans and advanced plans, my project coordinators will be showing up to actually participate in that whole process. And towards the right and to the left, I have in the pinkish color over there, or orange color over there, on staff we have a contract admin specialist that handle all payments for us for contracting purposes. We also have a quality compliance specialist, and then to the left we have design coordinator and a survey chief. Those folks to the right and to the left, they basically are specialists or experts that support our construction office. And again, the definitions are there. One of the things I did want to show to you at the bottom there, construction engineering, this is basically what we do. We're all about organizing and coordinating the people, equipment, and materials so that construction work is done efficiently, safely, and in an environmentally sensitive and sustainable way. So it's very important that we're part of the process from the beginning, okay? And as we go through that whole process and things start moving forward, it helps us such that when we get into construction, things are a whole lot easier. One of the things I did add to this slide this morning, and there's a handout that went out, I also wanted to introduce to you, at least expose you to the construction from a state level. And again, the definitions are here. And on the state level, everyone knows Joe Squire, right? I don't hear anything. He's not popular, huh? Everybody knows Joe. So Joe Squire is the state construction and materials engineer. His job is to ensure that, all of the other construction offices, if you will, the stuff that we do as far as administering contracts, abides by the rules. So he manages all the policy aspect of what we do, the new things that we actually incorporate into our construction offices. They actually float through his office, get the approvals, et cetera. And again, I just wanted to expose you to this. I've showed you some definitions, and you can go back and read this later on. But in Joe's office, he's got about 5 other branches that help support our construction offices, from contract administration, pavement services, laboratory services, quality assurance, even structural services. Believe it or not, in construction, every bit of material that's actually built out there at some point, some portion thereof, actually passes through Joe's office for some reason or another. Okay, so we don't just blindly go out there and build things and say, hey, we need to build this and get it done. We actually, there's a lot to this entire process. Any of you have any inspector certifications? Oh, very good. That actually makes you more valuable, right? Inspector certifications, this slide is up here to show you that our inspectors don't just simply learn on the job, just doing the stuff, but they actually go through some formal certification process. And in that certification process, we have certification programs where we certify them in asphalt, bridge construction, drill shaft foundation, environmental construction, signals, a whole host of things. And this is just a few of them. And you'll probably see that even when you go through the PDT, and that's why one of the reasons why in construction, when we review plans, we actually like to see a good set of plans. We don't really want to see them when they're like 10%. That may not help us out a whole lot. We actually like to see them when they get to that 80% milestone, when they get to that 90%, 100%, because there's enough information there for us to make some good assessment on, hey, how should we build this? How should we proceed with this? What's the best way we think that the contractor will approach this? But again, inspector certification, that's administered through Joe's office. If you have any interest, just talk with your manager, and obviously you can go and take those trainings if you would like. I would recommend, if you guys would like, at least the general inspector certification. That's one that's very good. That helps bring, at least from a TPM's perspective, help you understand the relationship between your contract plans, your specifications, and your special provisions. Okay? When I put this slide here together, again, my intent was to actually show you what involvement I have in this process in relationship to being part of the project design team, okay? So one of the milestones that we look at, and I kind of color-coded it too there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 through there. Milestone number 1, we actually start getting involved in the process since scoping, okay? How many people went gone scoping before? A lot of us. I think it's about every 4 years, every 3 years. We got this big cycle we kind of go through and take up all your time, and you can't do anything else but complete these tasks, right? You're saying yes. Even in scoping, we start looking at projects because, in the construction world, there's a lot of things, believe it or not, especially when you're staging projects, when you got different unique things that have to go on. If we don't look at things like, how is traffic going to flow through there? If we don't look at things that, like, we need a little bit more easement to be able to, build a simple ADA ramp. Those are certain things that we actually try to look at to try to make sure that as we get to the end of this cycle, it's a good set of plans to bid on. But during the milestone, in scoping, we start looking at things, and then as we start going through design acceptance, preliminary plans, advanced plans, and final plans, again, we're always reviewing those, looking at the stage and seeing how things are actually coming or developing, if you will, such that as we get towards the end, we have a good set of plans. Part 2 there, one of the things that we do look at that's very critical is project duration and bid timing. I think the next slide, well, maybe not the next slide, but a few slides down, we're gonna look at why some of those things are so critical for us. But bid timing is very important for us. The project duration is very important for us. Believe it or not, the longer the project is, say it goes 2 seasons, sometimes even 3 seasons, a lot of times we don't think that it actually cost me more money to manage that, okay? Because you gotta have more men on the ground watching things as things continue on month by month. CE budget development, there's a whole process in developing that CE budget that I go through, PDO 8. Does that ring a bell? I remember the one time when I first came to Region 2, I started developing my budget, and so I called up all these, the environmental discipline, the construction discipline, not construction discipline, but the hydraulic discipline. I said, look, tell me how many man hours you're gonna be on this job. And they all looked at me like, what? What are you talking about? We never do that. But the reality is, I have to actually come up with a raw cost on how much time it's gonna take each discipline, including the public affairs person, on my project. That's something that we have to come up with. A lot of times we just default to the percentage, whatever they give you, but that percentage is just a general direction. Sometimes it's not adequate. In many cases, it's not adequate. And then you'll also learn another thing that you should know about. Small projects hurt me. Percentages are generally not good enough, okay? Think of it this way. It always costs X to administer a project. The larger projects, usually there's enough percentage of dollars there to administer it. But those smaller ones, there's not a lot. In most cases, not enough, okay? Let's talk about bullet number 4 there. Very important. Very important. Public engagement. That's one part of my job that if we do it right from the beginning, it does make things a whole lot easier. I-5 paving, Woodburn to Salem, everybody familiar with that, right? All right, everybody familiar with that. That project's supposed to make me famous, not infamous, right? But if I remember correctly, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount, maybe Lisa can remember it, I think the PR campaign on just that project, it was probably about $80,000, if I remember correctly, okay? And that's from as the project was actually going out for bid, we had people already on the ground putting out notices, letting everybody know, look, we will be hampering you. And believe it or not, even though we've done that, first day on the job, we're closing it till 9 a.m., it was a mess. Everybody was upset. But as we worked through it, things got a little bit better. But again, that's part of the process here that we work through. Public engagement is one of the big things that I think that's really important for the projects that you work on, and make sure that you have a person on the project team to cover that aspect of it. When is the baton handed over? When do you think things transition over to construction? Any idea? No one knows? We got a huge room with brilliant minds here, and no one knows when it's handed over to construction? What do you think? Here's the racetrack. No one wants to guess either, right? Can I pick on somebody? So I put a couple of what I think, okay? There's a construction management transition, there's final plans, there's pre-construction. What about bid opening? You think that's when it happens over to me? Actually, there's really not a fixed point, because obviously in construction, things are handed over to me as we go through that whole cycle. I'm being involved in it through that whole process there, the lower half of the racetrack there. But if I were to pick a spot, Everyone knows where this sheet is, right? When you open up your bid plans, the special provisions, about the third sheet in there, it actually says the class of work. And then just below it, it says, if you have any questions, comments, guess who you got to call? At this point in time, I become the face of the project. All the bidder questions I handle, once it goes through OPO, they contact me for different things that I might need. Collecting that CE budget, I work with them to get that pushed through. Obviously work with my manager as well. But at this point in time, I become the face of the project. If there is a formal point, I think it's right here. But again, I need to be involved in the process from scoping, really. And then as we work through that lower half of the racetrack right there. This slide here, again, I may not touch everything on here, but I think the things that's important for you as far as what you would like to get out of this is understand that there is an optimal time to bid. You have to consider the work that you're doing on your project. You have to consider the various windows that we have in order to accomplish the work that you have. Prime example, we pay from March to September, okay? Don't have a bid opening in March, if that makes sense to you. More than likely, it's going to take about 3 months before I'm on the ground, okay? And by the time I get done most of the paving, we're done, which means I have to kick it back next year, okay? One of the other things you want to look for, too, is, and again, you'd have to work with your project team, see what's critical to them as far as what they need done during construction, and then kind of place that into where do you think that bid should go, okay? We have tree clearing certain times. We have Migratory Bird Act that we can, that we have to work around. We have in-water work periods, we have some work that we can, most construction projects can work during the summer, okay? But there are certain aspects of that construction project we can do during the winter. If your project has a lot of ADA ramps and a little bit of paving, we can actually bid that in, to be honest with you, in August, because we know the winter portion is what we're going to need to complete those ADA ramps, do a lot of sidewalks, and then as we get to the end of the year, boom, we do our final paving, because believe it or not, we have to have all our ramps and sidewalks completed before we actually do any paving, okay? And one of the things, too, that I see that we sometimes, at least in my project teams sometimes, we try to take advantage of 2 construction seasons, but we do it like it's 24 months when we can actually do it in 13 months. Does it make sense to you? Have a summer in the beginning and a summer at the end? So you don't have to do, because think about it, it costs me more time or more money, so to speak, when that project is still open for 2 full years. We can actually save some dollars right there just by utilizing the 2 summers if we can and not do the full 24 months. Some of the other things, there's no clock in here, right? Oh, right here. Okay, good. So I'm good on time. So some of the other things that we want to look at, plan ahead, visit the project site, stagger work types through the prime bidding periods. And you see the chart up there? It says in red what's poor. Okay, what's red was poor. So what's green is where you want to kind of shoot for. The other thing you want to look at when you're planning for projects, and a lot of times we're in our little PDTs, we're so focused on trying to get this one out the door that we don't realize that in the cube next to us, this other TPM has another project that's going to actually impact ours. Okay, are we thinking about how we're going to impact the project adjacent to us? That's something that's very important. Sometimes you may have what's called an interim completion date in your project. Okay, knowing how you're going to bid or where you're going to open that bid such that whatever interim completion or what needs to be completed on your project is completed on time such that a project that's coming right after yours can be able to function normally as they're going through the process of getting their project built. You know, those are certain things that we kind of need to also think about. So it's not just our single project that we're focused on, but we actually got to look a little more globally to see how we're impacting other projects as well. And just a little tidbit of information, if the project is already out, we can actually list that into our contract that's going out. Make sense? Any of us had to do that before? Okay, we can actually list that. You know, like for example, the I-5 project, or we actually listed 2 other projects that was already out on bid into this contract and told the contractor, look, I want you to coordinate your work such that you don't impact these 2 projects. Okay, those are things we have to look for. Again, there's bird windows. There's one thing that's not in here that's really good too is you do realize we have a planting season too, right? So do you know when the planting season actually starts though? You know? October, September? Okay. That means that we can't bid it in September and have the project closed out February. We'll never get the planting done, if that makes sense to you. Okay? So those are things that we have to look for as well. Again, this is in your packet there, and you can kind of look through some of the stuff. I put this slide in here just to talk a little bit about budgets and just to give everyone an overview, a familiarity of how we kind of look at budgets. Obviously, there's the construction engineering budget, which is our CE. We also have the contract amount. The contract amount is what the bidders actually bid on. Okay, that's the sum of bids included in the bid. We also have what's called the anticipated items. These are potential items of work performed on the project, not included in the contract amount or in the CE. Okay, and then towards we have contingencies, or 3.5%. Everybody knows contingencies are 3.5%, right? Can it get higher? How much higher can it get? 20%? 30%? 40%? Well, that's too much. And to my understanding, I've seen the contingencies go up to, I think it's 4.5 or maybe 4%. David, correct me if I'm wrong. Up to 5%. Okay? Why would we want to add more contingency? What is the purpose of the contingency? Cover the unknowns. And in the definition here, it says to handle the normal fluctuation of bid quantities. If you have a high-risk project, you think you want to increase the contingency? Question I want to ask you as TPMs, why generally we're so afraid to ask for more when it can go higher? Budget? David's got a lot of money. Don't worry about budget. Look, if you're in a situation, and work with your resident engineer, if you're in a situation and it warrants for you to have more money because of some, some circumstances, let's put it in there. Let's put it in there. Okay? Construction authorization. We know what that is, right? Construction authorization is basically the total amount of all those above it. Okay? Now, my job as the resident engineer is to make sure that I do not exceed that construction authorization. That's what I get graded on. It doesn't, I shouldn't say it. I was going to tell you, well, never mind. I'm graded on staying on budget, staying on time. Okay? And that's generally what I push my team to do. Stay on budget, stay on time. And believe me, there are certain instances where I got no choice. Just the other day, just last month, we're working out there in Ashwell, Plum Creek, Highway 99. We started doing the excavation as we're moving things out to put in some bridge piles in. we discovered that there's some timber set piles, if you will, that's in there that needs to be taken out. And as we're taking it out, all of a sudden we see a bunch of oil leaching out of the ground, coming into the creek. Oh no, you can't let that happen, right? So quickly we're talking with the contractor saying, look, we need to contain this right now. Don't let it get away from us, and let's pump it out, and then let's figure out a mitigation plan so that we can prevent this from getting worse. $120,000 at the end of I think it was about 3 weeks of work. $120,000 just to make that situation the way it should be. Okay, so sometimes we have to go over. Okay, it happens. But again, these are certain things. If we could catch them during the project design team, it's much better off. Increase in construction authorization. That's anything greater than 500K. You're gonna need OTC approval, and then an overrun. Then there's a difference between the two. An overrun is a increase in the authorization that's less than 500K. Okay, and generally speaking, you just need obviously the proper upline management approval to do that. I think it goes up to, depending on the dollar amount, it actually goes up to your region manager. Okay, and then I put this portion up top there just to kind of show you what are some of the approval levels that certain individuals have, starting from myself to the far left as the PM that's shown on here. I can write CCOs up to 100K. I can settle major claims up to 50K. And then I can adjust contract time up to 14 more days, okay, within my approval authority. And then as it moves forward on up to your bridge delivery unit, CPM, your area manager, your region manager, and et cetera, those dollar values accumulatively adjust. Okay? That graph there, you can find it in your construction manual, but I believe I have an older version up, so this is subject to be updated. Okay? Let's talk about construction management transition, but this is, again, from the perspective of what I do in relationship to the TPMs. Okay? Advertising, what's my job? Typically, I respond to bidder questions. Okay? During the advertisement period, I respond to bidder questions, and usually the advertisement period is 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the size and complexity of the project. Okay? Everyone knows what an addenda is. Okay? Again, I said there's a lot of information on here. Everyone has it on their printouts and so forth, and you can always refer back to it. Addenda is basically when we're adding language to the contract. Mandatory pre-bids. Let's talk about that for a little bit. How many people have gone to mandatory pre-bids before? What do you think about them? They're great. Okay. They work. Okay. Believe it or not, quite a few TPMs don't know when to actually use one. Okay. What I will say, mandatory pre-bid is what it is. Mandatory. That means that the bidder cannot bid on the job unless they actually attend this meeting. Okay? What do we do mandatory pre-bids for? Generally, when you have more complex projects, where you have, let's say, maybe I'm in Rose Quarter, and I've got a staging a situation that's just clearly uncommon, but yet I want the contractor to follow this. Okay? This mandatory pre-bid, I'm going to sit down with all the bidders and walk them through that process. Okay? When you have a project that's using maybe some unique construction process that's probably not used before, okay? This mandatory pre-bid, you're able to sit down with all the bidders who are bidding and address to them the concerns that the agency have such that they can complete this project. Sometimes in that mandatory pre-bid, you'll have stakeholders there who are very important to the project. Army Corps of Engineers, you'll have all these different elements sitting right there. And during that pre-bid process, that mandatory pre-bid process, bidders will have questions. Some of them I'll be able to answer. Some of them I'll respond back with a written response. But again, It's typically, when I have used it, it's for those projects that has some high stakes involved in it, high complexity, okay? And we want to make sure that we convey to the bidders what are the agency's concerns and interests to be able to accomplish this project, okay? Letters of clarification, I think we've all gone through that. Bidlets, obviously those happen on Thursdays, and it's awarded, or not awarded, but it's at that point in time you can find the apparent low bid. And then notice I put in red responsive bidder, okay? That's very important. Everybody know what responsive mean, right? Okay. OPL does a bid analysis during this period for us too, and that bid analysis kind of shows us and tells us what things we need to watch out for. You know, these bidders, they've become very talented at what they do. You know, they know how to front load the project. They know that if in the beginning of the project, they're going to use bid item number 1, what they can do is take dollars out of bid items down below, put them in bid item number 1, keep their whole bid the same, yet as they're doing the project, they get a lot more money up front. You know, so they kind of shuffle. You know, the Office of Project Controls help us to be able to see those things and identify those potential areas of risk and so forth that as a construction project manager or area engineer that I need to understand. Okay, a request for CE budget. At that time, I developed my CE budget request. I order my contracts. The intent of award happens. Award, we know what that is. And then NTP is issued after that. It's at NTP that I formally make contact with the contractor. Not before, but at that point in time. After NTP, generally it takes about 30 days after that, we do our PreCon meeting. At our PreCon meeting, we pretty much invite everyone to come. You know, the project team members, you folks, et cetera. We all sit down for the first time and we meet the contractor. Oh, this is Mr. Contractor. He's going to be working on the job, yada, 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 et cetera. And then during that PreCon meeting, pretty much some of the key things that we try to look for, or at least identify, is project safety, what are the communications that need to happen during the project. We talk about documentation and pay requirements. We also talk about means and methods, and we also talk about environmental concerns. There's a whole host of things we do try to talk about, and one of the things I really stress to establish to my contractor is the fact that, yes, we're all ODOT in here, but if anyone else besides me tell you to do something, you're working for free. Does that make sense to you? Okay. A lot of times, you know, and you probably see this before too. You get a lot of different designers. You know, some of them they're on different ends of the spectrum. There are some that are really heavy-handed, and then there are some that are really loose. You know, but understand, according to the contract, and I think everyone knows this by now. According to the contract, the specification, guess who the engineer is? It's me. Okay, that delegation's been handed to me from our chief engineer, which would be Steve Cooley. Everyone else on the job is the professional of record who's actually done plans, et cetera, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to continue on for the sake of time. The contractor responsibility is to coordinate with all the utilities and other contractors. Okay, provide notifications to motor carrier, and then if there's any changes to the traffic control and so forth, they got to get in touch with us, myself. And then if there's any clarification that they need or any interpretation that they need for the contract, they contact me. You can see why it's so important that we actually have good contracts when they go out for bid. You know, everything is hinged on the language we put in there, the stipulations we put in there, what process we may want the contractor to actually work. The contractor must comply with all laws and permits. They must schedule their work. They're in control of their means and methods. You know, the more I have to stick my hand into the contract, into the process to make my contractor do something left or right, that's the more I expose myself actually to liability, or to make myself maybe the right word is not at fault, but make myself more liable to what's going on. But I typically try to step back, let the contractor do their things, and from a distance, my team and I were monitoring everything that they do, and as soon as they come outside of certain boundaries, you need to get back in and follow this, okay? That's our job. We have to ride herd on these contractors. The contractor must provide the materials, the equipment, and labor. They have to manage their subcontracts and their suppliers, and they perform all the materials testing, okay? They ensure the quality of the workmanship and any other contract obligations that needs to go on. Construction notices, there's first note, second note, third note. First note basically says, hey, Mr. Contractor, we've acknowledged that you have started on the job. This is the first day you come out on the job. Whether they plant a sign, whether they start doing erosion control, etc., we make that acknowledgement. Second note is when they complete all bid item work, okay? Third note is when they have completed all the contract requirements. Contract requirements is not just what needs to be built, but there's a whole host of documentation that actually comes along with that they must provide for us in order for us to be able to third note this, okay? And believe it or not, they're still on the hook up until third note. If anything happens out there on the grade, for them to repair, fix, et cetera, et cetera. The final acceptance doesn't come from my office. It actually comes on a state level from Joe Squire's group. And that's when they make the formal notice, hey, look, this project has been completed. It meets all FHWA ODOT requirements. Therefore, you can close the EA. Just so you know, first note from the time bid happens, is opened to the time first note occurs is generally about 2.5 months, okay? From the time second note to third note takes about 5 months, sometimes shorter. And then final acceptance just comes, you know, sometimes it's a month later, sometimes it's 2 months later, et cetera.
Hey, Vidal,
yes?
You just mentioned plan establishment and how that might affect.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. There is, when we have plan establishments on the project, basically it tells the contractor that for all the plants that you've planned on there, you have at least 1 year that you have to monitor that plant to ensure its survival. Which means that I can't even third note that project or even third note that project until the plant establishment is actually completed with all its documentation. And think about if you have a project that's already 2 seasons, and then you've got to deal with plant establishment for an additional year. You're keeping that EA open for a long time. And I've seen it happen more and more, you know, once, twice, 3 times, many times over. The longer you keep these EAs open, the dollars that's allocated in there just slowly dwindles away. But the faster we can close them, push them out, that money actually goes back to the region to help other projects out, okay? Change orders, contract change orders, basically that's when we're modifying the work required by contract. Extra work order is work that's not included in the contract that we're going to allow the contractor to do. And a state force work order is when we have public forces come in to do specific items for us, you know. And then a force account is basically when myself and the contractor cannot agree on what we think the cost should be for this work that he's doing. When we don't agree on it, we follow a force account method. Claims, disagreements, you know, no such thing as a perfect set of plans. Even if it's a blank sheet of paper, no such thing. We will run into problems. We will run into things that are just typos, things that, oh, the designer forgot this, things, and then sometimes, believe it or not, even my team, in our reviews, sometimes we can't catch it all, okay? But we do have a process in place on how to mitigate those things that we either miss or that we didn't catch, et cetera, okay? And if we can't agree on what we think it should be, we have a claims process to follow. Questions? David.
I got a question. What role does the TPM have when it comes to developing the CE budget? And when in the process should the CE budget start to be developed?
Okay. There's two parts to this. And the first part to it is typically I think correct me if I'm wrong, almost at every stage, preliminary, advanced, and final, there is an estimate that's made, right? And so generally what happens is once you get to advanced plans, when that estimate is made, the spec writer will go ahead and throw in what he thinks is the CE, right? But as the TPM, it's at that time, send to my office, hey, give us what you think the CE should be for this project, right around advanced plans, okay? And usually the spec writer, when he throws that in, it's gonna be a percent, because he's not gonna really calculate it out based on PDO8. It's my job to do that, okay? Now, once we get to advanced plans and you ask me for that CE budget, I'm going to develop one, I'm going to give it to you, but I'm actually going to have to do it again when the final bids are in, because then that's when I take the real numbers, the bid numbers that was bid, and I develop it for OPO. Any other questions?
This is more of a general statement, maybe for the newer REs, CPMs. The thing to note is that at second note also, the surveyors have to we have monumentation we have to do, and there's a holdout inside the construction budget for that monumentation. And I've seen several times where that dollar amount has been used up in construction and there's no money left for us to monument. So just to be aware that there's a holdout there for monumentation to happen inside the construction budget.
Very good point.
It depends on the project. I mean, how many,
Yes.
it really depends.
Yes.
Yeah, 10 more, yeah.
Very good point, very good point. Depending on the project, the complexity of it, we need to have monumentation completed. And if I had one of my budgets up here, I could show you. In my CE budget, I actually throw in what I think their survey cost is going to be to do that. And generally, I tell my staff, look here, once that contract budget gets down to about 70K, 60K, and there's no more money, let's get off of it. Let's turn it in, okay? Because I know that Joe Squire's group have to do their process with that budget, and then you've got monumentation that actually has to occur on that project as well. Very good point.
So I got another question, Vidal.
Yes.
Can you speak a bit to right-of-way obligations, the state's obligations, and the importance of ensuring that construction is aware of what all those obligations are when right-of-way negotiates with the property owner?
You know, one of the things I like to do with some of my projects is the fact that I like to have what's called a handoff meeting. And in Region 2, we started doing that with our environmental team. And I need to start doing that with our right-of-way team, okay? Because a lot of times when on the front end of the design part of it, our right-of-way people, they're actually going to these homes, talking to these people. They're actually making deals with them, okay? And in those deals are things like, take out my sprinkler. In those deals are things like, okay, if you're going to remove this sign, I need a little wall here. In those deals are things like, you know, my fence here, you're taking it down, fine, but guess what? I want you to put a wooden fence up here with this type of decor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? On the front end of it, I try to make it such that our right-of-way people actually handle all that through either through their own contracts and so forth. But in a lot of cases, they get carried over to construction. Okay, and our right-of-way obligations are it's a time for me to sit down and look at each one of those individual property owners, see what deal we made, and ensure that we follow through on those deals. Okay? Now imagine, if I've got a little small project that's like 1 mile of paving, it's out in some rural area, barely any homes impacted, my right-of-way obligations are going to be really low, right? Barely none. But if I'm going through downtown Portland or maybe Salem, or actually a good example is Hoffman to Monmouth, Oregon 99, right through there. Everybody gone through Hoffman lately? It's different now, completely rebuilt. Okay? We've had so many businesses along that road that I got to go through each right-of-way file and see what we committed to and make sure that I commit to it. You know, it's one thing when the state says they're going to do something and then don't follow through on it. Oh man, they come after us hard. You know, they come after us hard. So I like to have handoff meetings with my right-of-way team, okay, to talk about, hey, what property owners we've made commitments to, that commitment comes down to construction and we have to follow through on it. Make sense? You as the TPM, you know, it would be good for you to be familiar with those things too, because there are certain things as the construction manager I cannot commit to. And you need to be able to say to this right-of-way agent, look, construction can't do this. It's asking for some environmental remediation, and we don't have time in the project to do that. Make sense? Okay. Again, it's going to vary from project to project. Any other questions?
Could your office eventually provide some guidance on the percentage of total project costs that should be included for the the construction, the construction inspection budget, if you will?
Oh, in other words,
Yeah.
If I understand your question right, how I develop that CE budget, I look at the amount of time it's going to take to complete that project, and in that amount of time, I actually figure out how much staff is going to be on there. And then I go up per month, how many hours I think each staff is going to be on there. I do that for my office, and I do that for all of the other disciplines.
So that's how ODOT would do it for?
Yes.
So you can't really get a straight across percentage of total project costs? Because it's not specific to the job.
Yes. Any other questions? Alvin?
I just have a general statement. When you're outsourcing projects and you're going to deal with a CE budget, you usually need to kind of, it's not written anywhere, but you have to kind of factor that in shortly after DAP, because not only do you need to estimate the increase in cost because you're going to be outsourcing the PM work,
Oh, yes.
but you also have to factor it into your and coordinate it with your spec writer to make sure you get enough money in your budget. And also in engineer of record work, if you're going to need a contract for that too, you should start it after DAP.
Very good point. Very good point. Any other? I think someone had their hand up here.
Just, if it's real quick, this is our last comment and question.
Sorry.
This is more of a comment. Getting back to plant establishment, if you know there's going to be plant establishment on your project, talk to your STIP coordinator. We're moving away from including that work in the contract because of what you were describing, that you can't reach third note until it's complete. And instead, we are generally setting up an other phase so that work can be completed through, either the small contracts program or whatever. And that'll enable you to close out your construction contract.
Good. Thank you, everyone.
Vidal, thank you for starting us off this morning.
Oh.